Mbeko was a village that sat peacefully within the embrace of nature, nestled among rolling hills where the earth was rich, and the air, heavy with the scent of lush vegetation, told stories of old. The people of Mbeko lived simple lives, tending their crops and sharing the fruits of their labor. They celebrated together, mourned together, and above all, they honored the land and their ancestors. But looming over the village like an unspoken threat stood Ngando Kilele, the Forbidden Forest. Its dark canopy stretched far beyond the horizon, casting long shadows over the village as if the forest itself were watching. The villagers spoke of it in hushed tones, never daring to go near. Elders would gather the young ones around the fire and warn them. There are places in this world that must never be disturbed, young ones. The forest is one of them. Many who entered it have never returned. Those who did return were never the same. Remember the stories and do not test the spirits. Kalumba stood on the edge of the village, his eyes fixed on the forest that beckoned like an uncharted dream. He was a young man with no parents to guide him, an orphan raised by the village, but that alone did not define him. He was restless, yearning for something greater than the life that awaited him here. Unlike the other villagers, Kalumba had a heart full of ambition, an unquenchable thirst to be more than just another face among the crowd. His dreams were bigger than the fertile land that surrounded the village, and his spirit often wandered far beyond the hills. Why must we live like this? He often asked himself. Why must our lives be bound by tradition, by simple work, by the limits others set for us? In the stillness of his thoughts, Kalumba would look to the horizon, where the forest loomed, a place where no one dared venture, but a place where he believed greatness lay. He longed for recognition, for a story to be told of him that would echo through time, like the elders' tales of past heroes. But as much as he dreamed, Kalumba felt the weight of isolation. His ambition set him apart, and the village values of humility and tradition left him feeling like an outsider, watching as his peers carried on with their lives. The annual festival of ancestors had arrived, a sacred night when the village gathered around the great fire to honor the spirits of their ancestors. The air was thick with the sound of drumming, and the fire crackled and danced as the villagers sat in a wide circle, eagerly awaiting the elders' tales. One elder, Baba Kundo, stood up, his old bones creaking beneath his weathered skin. His voice, low and steady, held the crowd's attention as he spoke. Tonight, we remember those who came before us, the spirits who watch over us, protect us, and guide us. But we must also remember the lessons they left for us. The fire flickered, casting shadows over Baba Kundo's face as he continued. Long ago, there was a hidden treasure, a calabash of great power, buried deep within Ngando Kilele. It was left by the spirits, a gift for the worthy. But remember this: what the forest gives, the forest takes, and the spirits never forget. There was a sharp intake of breath from the villagers as Baba Kundo's words hung in the air. The crackling fire seemed to pause, as if the forest itself were listening. To take from the forest, Baba Kundo warned, is to take from the spirits, and those who do so may find themselves lost, or worse, changed beyond recognition. Never forget, what you seek in the forest may seek you in return. Kalumba's heart raced. His mind raced with thoughts of the calabash, of the power that lay hidden in the heart of the forbidden forest. To claim it, to prove himself worthy, could be the key to the greatness he sought. That night, Kalumba could not sleep. The elder's words echoed in his mind, and the fire of curiosity that had sparked in him during the festival had grown into an uncontrollable flame. He knew that the calabash was meant for someone worthy, and for the first time in his life, Kalumba believed that someone could be him. What if he was the one the spirits had been waiting for? What if his name could be etched into the stories of the village forever? He could feel the pull of the forest, the lure of the unknown, drawing him in. As the stars glimmered overhead, Kalumba whispered to the still night, "This is my chance. My only chance. I will not be remembered as a man who lived quietly in the shadows of others." The forest was waiting. The next morning, as the villagers gathered to tend to their work, Kalumba found himself speaking to his closest friend, Mosi. Mosi, whose loyalty was as steady as the village's traditions, had always been Kalumba's grounding force. "I can see it in your eyes, Kalumba," Mosi said, his voice filled with concern. "You're thinking of the forest again, aren't you?" Kalumba hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Mosi, you know I can't ignore it any longer. The stories, the calabash, what if it's meant for me? What if I could prove that I am more than just another villager? The spirits, they must be waiting for someone like me." Mosi shook his head, worry clouding his expression. "The spirits are not toys for you to play with. The elders have warned us. The forest is not a place for the curious. It is a place for those who understand the cost of trespassing." But Kalumba was not deterred. He looked deep into Mosi's eyes and said, "Do you not understand, Mosi? I cannot live this life quietly. I was born for something more." As if summoned by Kalumba's words, a voice cut through the tension. Django, a rival who always seemed eager to challenge Kalumba's every move, stepped forward, a smirk on his face. "So, Kalumba, the dreamer," Django taunted, "are you finally going to prove your worth by entering the forest? You think the spirits care about your ambitions? They will consume you, just like they have consumed others before you." Kalumba stood tall, his fists clenched. "I will not be cowed by fear, Django. I will do what none of you have the courage to do." Mosi stepped forward, his voice pleading. "Please, Kalumba, listen to reason. The forest is not a place to prove yourself. There are other ways." But Kalumba was already lost to his obsession. The seed had been planted, and nothing could stop him from seeking the calabash. He would go into the forest, no matter the cost. As the sun set that evening, Kalumba made his decision. He would go alone, at night, when the villagers slept, and the forest was at its darkest. He would sneak away, his heart pounding with anticipation. The village would not know of his journey until it was too late, and in the silence of the forbidden forest, he would find the power he so desperately sought. The moon hung high in the sky, its pale light spilling over the village of Mbeko, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers across the earth. The village was still, the quiet broken only by the occasional chirp of a night bird or the rustling of leaves in the breeze. Kalumba had waited for this moment, the moment when the villagers' sleep would be deep enough for him to slip away, unnoticed. He stood by the door of his small hut, the air cool against his skin. His heart pounded, not with fear, but with a fire that burned deep within him. In his hands, he held his grandmother's protective charm, crafted from beads, feathers, and the bones of ancient creatures, its warmth a small comfort against the cold chill of the night. He tucked it carefully into his satchel, along with a sharp knife. Kalumba had made his decision. The stories, the warnings, they all faded into the distance as he stepped away from the safety of his village. His destiny was tied to the forbidden forest, and tonight he would claim it. As he made his way toward the edge of the village, the dark outline of Ngando Kilele loomed ahead. The trees, like ancient giants, stretched high into the night sky, their thick branches creating a canopy that swallowed the light. It was as if the forest were alive, breathing in time with his own quickening pulse. Each step he took drew him closer to the heart of the mystery and farther from the life he had known. The village was now nothing but a distant memory, its sounds fading into an eerie silence. With a deep breath, Kalumba crossed the threshold. The moment he stepped into the forest, the air grew colder, heavier. The familiar sounds of the village, laughter, singing, the low murmur of conversation, were replaced by an unsettling quiet. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath, as if The forest itself was waiting. A strange rustling sound followed him, soft but persistent. Kalumba stopped, his heart racing, his senses on high alert. The sound of footsteps, small, shuffling, was unmistakable. But when he turned to look, there was nothing, only the shadows of the trees bending and swaying. Kalumba's breath caught in his throat, but his ambition pushed him forward. He could not afford to turn back, not now. The thought of the calabash, glowing with untold power, filled his mind, drowning out the whispers of caution that tried to take root in his heart. Then, a faint whisper, a voice that seemed to come from the trees themselves, reached his ears. It was so soft that he almost thought it was the wind, but it was not. The words were unintelligible, lost in the movement of the leaves. Kalumba stood still, listening. The whispers came again, this time closer, as though the forest itself were speaking to him, urging him deeper into its dark heart. His body tensed, and his hand instinctively reached for the protective charm his grandmother had given him. Yet his resolve did not waver. Ambition, fierce and consuming, pushed him onward. "I must go on," he whispered to himself. "I cannot turn back. Not now." The deeper Kalumba ventured into the forest, the stranger the world around him became. The trees closed in, their trunks gnarled and ancient, their limbs twisting toward the sky like skeletal arms reaching for something only they could understand. His feet sank into the soft earth, each step taking him further away from the world he knew. Suddenly, a dark shape caught his eye, an owl perched upon a branch, its feathers as black as the night itself. Its eyes glowed with an eerie light, unblinking and unwavering. Kalumba froze, staring back into the owl's gaze, feeling as if the bird was looking into his very soul. The owl tilted its head slightly, as though it recognized him, or perhaps was judging him. Then, with a sudden, sharp motion, it flew into the darkness, vanishing without a trace. Kalumba took a step forward, but as he did, he noticed something. Strange on the ground, a trail of flowers, blackened and withered, stretched across his path. He hesitated. The forest seemed to watch him, urging him to turn away. But as his foot brushed the flowers, something miraculous happened. They bloomed. Just for a moment, bright and alive, only to wither again as quickly as they had appeared. A chill ran down Kalumba's spine. It was a sign, one he could not ignore. He took another step, and the mist around him thickened. It was not a hindrance, but a guide, whispering through the air, curling around his body, pushing him further into the forest. The deeper he went, the more the forest seemed to bend and shift around him, as if it were alive, testing him, judging him with every move he made. Hours passed, the darkness of the forest swallowing time, until Kalumba stumbled upon something extraordinary. An ancient tree, its trunk twisted and knotted, stood before him like a silent sentinel. Its bark was etched with strange symbols, symbols that seemed to pulse with a quiet power. The tree exuded an aura of mystery, of something ancient and beyond understanding. And at its base, lying upon the roots, was a small calabash, glowing faintly in the moonlight. Kalumba's breath caught in his throat. It was the calabash, the very treasure the elders had spoken of. His heart raced with excitement, and greed curled in his chest. This was it. This was his moment. The spirits had led him here. He was worthy. He could feel the energy of the calabash calling to him, ignoring the warning carved into the bark. Take only what your spirit can bear. Kalumba reached out and grasped the calabash. As soon as his fingers closed around it, a surge of energy coursed through his body, filling him with a power he had never known. His skin tingled and his senses heightened. In that moment, Kalumba felt invincible, as though the entire forest was at his command. But deep within, a dark whisper echoed, something he could not name but something he could feel, but as Kalumba too could not name, but something he could feel. The calabash pulsed in his hands, casting shifting shadows around him. It was beautiful. It was powerful. It was his. But as Kalumba turned to leave, he noticed something had changed. The air around him was thicker now, as if the very forest was pressing in on him. The mist that had once guided him had thickened into an oppressive fog, making the path ahead unclear. The creatures that had once skittered in the shadows now scattered in fear, leaving the forest eerily silent. Kalumba crossed a river, its waters now a deep, blood-red hue. His reflection stared back at him, distorted, as if the water itself were rejecting him. The image of the calabash in his hands seemed to glow more fiercely, but it was no longer a source of power. It was a burden. The distant howl of a hyena echoed through the trees, sending a shiver down his spine. It was a warning. A price had been paid, and it was not yet clear what that price would be. With every step, the forest seemed to grow darker, and the weight of his actions pressed heavier upon him. He was not alone anymore. Something watched him, something ancient and unforgiving. Kalumba could feel it, but he did not understand it. Kalumba emerged from the forest, the moon now hanging low in the sky, its pale light casting long shadows. Behind him, he was alive, but something inside him felt different. The weight of the calabash in his hands was heavier than before, as if the forest had marked him. The journey had changed him, and the consequences of his actions had only just begun to unfold. He did not know it yet, but the forest had judged him, and the price would come due sooner than he thought. Kalumba returned to the village, his heart full of triumph. The calabash, the source of his newfound power, rested heavily in his hands. Its glow seemed to brighten with every step he took, as if it, too, was eager to show its true might. The village was still, the evening air thick with anticipation. Kalumba had not told anyone of the calabash's extraordinary abilities, and now he would reveal them all. He gathered the villagers in the central clearing, calling out to them, with a voice that rang with confidence. "Gather, all of you," he commanded, his words carrying like thunder through the air. "Witness the power of the calabash, the gift that the ancestors have bestowed upon me." The villagers, wary but intrigued, gathered around, their eyes wide with curiosity and fear. Kalumba held the calabash high, his eyes alight with the excitement of what was to come. He whispered a prayer, invoking the spirits, and then raised the calabash to the heavens. Moments later, the sky darkened, and the first drop of rain fell. A gentle, then steady shower began to soak the parched earth. The crops in the fields, long dry and withered, seemed to stretch their roots upward as if awakened by the touch of the rain. The villagers gasped, some even falling to their knees, in awe. Kalumba smiled, his chest swelling with pride. He had done it. He had brought the rain. Next, Kalumba stepped forward, his eyes searching for another demonstration. He raised the calabash again, and with a soft incantation, the earth trembled. Before their very eyes, crops that had long been stunted and barren began to grow. Tall and strong, their green leaves unfurling in the moonlight, the villagers stared, mouths agape, as the once barren land transformed before them. Then Kalumba moved to a sick elder who had been suffering for weeks. He placed his hand on the old woman's forehead, and with a soft touch the pain seemed to lift. Her eyes opened wide, and she let out a sound of surprise. "I can feel the life returning to me," she exclaimed, standing up slowly. A murmur of amazement spread through the crowd. "Behold," Kalumba cried, his voice rising in triumph, "the calabash has granted me power to heal, to restore, to bring forth what was lost." Django, Kalumba's rival, saw the opportunity to turn the villagers fully against him. He stirred the fears of the people, calling Kalumba a curse to the village, a harbinger of death and destruction. The villagers, consumed by fear and frustration, gathered to cast Kalumba out. With shouts of anger and fear, they drove him away from the village, banishing him to the outskirts where he could no longer harm them. Kalumba, alone and forsaken, stood at the edge of the village, clutching the calabash tightly to his chest. The whispers grew louder, mocking him for his greed, his pride, his folly. The power that had once been his greatest gift now felt like the weight of the world, crushing him. The once proud hero had fallen, and in his isolation, he was left to hear the haunting whispers of the calabash, reminding him of his choices, of the path he had chosen. In the distance, the village burned, and Kalumba, the spirit's chosen one, was left to face the consequences of his ambition. Kalumba sat alone. Beneath the star-filled sky, his heart heavy and his mind lost in the whispers of the calabash. The once proud and powerful object now felt like a burden, its voice creeping into his thoughts, mocking him for his choices. He clutched the calabash tightly to his chest, but it felt as though it were pulling away, as if the very air around him was trying to force him to let go. "Kalumba," the calabash whispered, its voice no longer sweet but cold and venomous. "You thought you could master me, but I am no gift. I am the test of your heart, the mirror of your soul." The words cut through him like a blade. Kalumba looked down at the calabash, his hands trembling. The weight of the power it had given him, the pride and greed that had consumed him, were now clear. His ambition had clouded his judgment, leading him to betray the harmony of his community, to use his gifts for his own gain rather than the good of others. "You destroyed them all," the calabash continued, its voice low and sorrowful. "The village that once called you chosen one, they are gone, their lives broken, their faith shattered, and you, Kalumba, are the cause." Kalumba's heart sank. The weight of his actions, his selfishness, had cost him everything. The villagers, his friends, his community, they were gone, lost because of his inability to see the true cost of power. Tears welled in his eyes as guilt surged within him. "Tell me," the calabash mocked, "did you think you could change the world without changing yourself?" Kalumba's shoulders slumped, the words like stones in his chest. He closed his eyes, reflecting on everything that had led him to this moment. His hunger for power, his desire for admiration, his refusal to listen to the warnings of those who loved him. Each choice had drawn him further from the balance that had once guided him. Now, all he had was this empty exile and the haunting voice of the calabash. The next morning, as the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, Kalumba made a decision. He would atone. He would return the calabash to the forest, the place where it had first called to him. He knew it was the only way to reclaim his soul and restore what he had broken. With each step toward the forbidden forest, Kalumba's heart grew heavier, but not from regret alone. This time, his steps were slow and deliberate, grounded in humility. Gone was the proud man who had sought to control the elements. Now, only a humbled soul remained, ready to face the consequences of his choices. The forest, once dark and ominous, now seemed less hostile. The trees seemed to part as if recognizing the change in him. The whispers of the spirits were softer now, no longer filled with judgment, but with a quiet understanding. Kalumba approached the ancient tree, the one where the calabash had first been placed. The very earth around it felt alive with the energy of the ancestors, a silent reminder of the sacredness of this place. Kalumba kneeled and carefully placed the calabash at the base of the tree, bowing his head in reverence. "Spirits of the forest, ancestors of my people," Kalumba whispered, his voice trembling, "I have wronged you. I have wronged the land, and I have wronged my people. Please forgive me. I return this gift with a humble heart, asking only for your mercy and guidance." The forest held its breath. The air grew still as if time itself paused to listen. Kalumba waited, his eyes closed, his hands trembling at his sides. For a long while, nothing moved. But then, a soft light began to glow from the ancient tree, a faint shimmer that spread like ripples across the forest floor. The once faint sounds of the forest returned. Birds began to sing, the wind stirred the leaves, and the flowers that had withered in the wake of his greed began to bloom once again. The villagers, once skeptical, now called him the spirit's chosen one. They worshipped him, seeing him as a divine messenger, sent to save them from suffering and despair. Kalumba reveled in their admiration, feeling a sense of pride and validation that he had never known before. For the first time, he felt that he mattered, that his life had purpose. The power of the calabash made him feel invincible, and the whispers of the villagers fueled his growing sense of importance. He was their savior, their protector, their hero. As the days passed, however, Kalumba began to notice subtle changes. The rain he summoned no longer fell with the gentle touch of a blessing. It came in torrents, relentless and fierce. The skies would open up, drowning the village, flooding homes, and washing away the crops that had just sprouted. The villagers, once joyful and grateful, now looked upon him with growing fear. They huddled in their homes, praying that the rain would stop, but it never did. Kalumba, still ignorant of the consequences, ignored their concerns. "It's just the power of the spirits," he would say, brushing off their worries. "This is a blessing. Do not be afraid." But as the days grew darker, the signs of trouble became impossible to ignore. The crops that had flourished overnight withered within days, their green leaves turning to ash, falling to the ground in a cloud of dust. The animals, once eager to graze, now kept their distance, avoiding Kalumba and his power. Even the children, those who had once followed him with wide-eyed wonder, began to shy away, their faces filled with confusion and unease. The whispers from the calabash grew louder at night, its voice soft and tempting. Kalumba would hear it, in the quiet of his hut, a voice that was not his own, coaxing him to use the calabash's power more recklessly. "Use it more," the calabash would murmur. "Claim more power. You deserve it. They fear you because you are strong. Show them all." The voice played on his greed, feeding the fire of his ambition. Kalumba could feel it growing inside him, an insatiable hunger that could not be satisfied. He did not understand that the calabash was not just a gift, it was a curse. But the village was changing, and so was he. One evening, as the villagers gathered by the fire, they whispered among themselves, casting wary glances toward Kalumba. Once he had been their hero, their miracle worker. Now they spoke of the strange changes in him, his darkening mood, his obsession with the calabash, and the growing dread that seemed to follow him wherever he went. Mosi, Kalumba's best friend, approached him that evening, concern etched on his face. "Kalumba," he said, his voice soft but urgent, "something has changed. The people are afraid. The rain does not bring life anymore. It brings destruction. The crops we've planted are dying. The animals are running from you. Even the children fear you." Kalumba's eyes narrowed, his pride flaring. "They do not understand," he snapped. "They are weak. I have given them blessings and they turn on me for a few missteps. It is not my fault. It is the ancestors testing me." Mosi took a deep breath, his voice trembling with emotion. "Kalumba, you must return the calabash to the forest. It is not meant for human hands to wield. The power you are seeking. Look at the destruction it has caused. Please, do not let your pride blind you. Return it before it is too late." Kalumba's face darkened, his heart swelling with anger and fear. "You speak of envy, Mosi. You are afraid of the power I wield. But I will not be shamed. I will not give up what is mine." And with that, Kalumba turned away, his words cutting through the air like a whip. Mosi's face fell, and in that moment, their friendship was shattered. Mosi had been his closest companion, but now Kalumba saw him as nothing more than a threat to his newfound glory. The following days were marked by growing tension, and the villagers began to fear Kalumba as much as they had once revered him. Whispers of his power's curse spread like wildfire, and soon the very people who had once called him the spirit's chosen one began to distance themselves. They feared that his connection to the calabash was upsetting the balance of the world, angering the ancestors, and bringing ruin upon them all. Then the drought struck. Despite Kalumba's attempts to use the calabash to summon rain, the skies remained cloudless. The crops withered, and the people's desperation grew. The once hopeful villagers now blamed Kalumba for their suffering, convinced that his power had angered the spirits and upset the balance of nature. Kalumba felt a weight lift from his heart. He stood, looking up at the tree, sensing the spirits' forgiveness, their acceptance of his apology. In that moment, he knew that the journey of atonement had only just begun, but he had taken the first step toward redemption. As Kalumba made his way back to the village, the skies darkened once more, but this time it was not a storm. The heavens opened up, and the rains came, not in torrents but gently, as if the earth itself had sighed in relief. The drought had ended. The land, once parched and cracked, now drank deeply of the life-giving rain. The crops that had withered began to stir, reaching for the sky, and the animals returned, grazing once more in the fields. Kalumba walked through the village, his heart heavy but hopeful. The villagers, who had once turned their backs on him, now stood in the open, watching the miracle unfold before their eyes. They did not yet know the full story of his journey, but they could see the change in him, the humility that now radiated from him. He approached the elders, bowing low before them. "I have returned, not as the man I was, but as one who has learned the cost of pride and greed," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of his journey. "I ask only that you allow me to share my story, so that all may learn from my mistakes." The elders listened, their faces solemn. After a long silence, the eldest of them, Mzi Ndiko, spoke. "Kalumba, your journey is one that will be told for generations. It is a story of redemption, a story of humility. We welcome you back, but we remind you, and all who hear your tale, that power is a gift, not to be taken lightly. It is the balance between giving and taking, between serving and leading, that brings true harmony." Kalumba's days of seeking power had ended. The man who had once been driven by ambition now found purpose in service to the village. He worked the land with the villagers, helping to restore what had been lost. He no longer sought admiration or praise, but instead he gave his energy to rebuilding the trust that had been broken. Through his actions, he taught others the value of humility, the importance of respecting nature, and the wisdom of the ancestors. The villagers slowly began to embrace him once again, not as a leader but as a humble member of the community. Kalumba, in turn, found peace in this new role, no longer burdened by the weight of his former desires. The calabash, once a symbol of his downfall, was now a distant memory. What remained was the man who had learned, through loss and regret, that true strength lies in serving others and honoring the balance of life. And so, the village of Mbeko flourished once more, its people stronger and wiser for the lessons learned through Kalumba's journey. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting its final golden light over the village, the air grew cool and the village gathered by the crackling fire. Children, their eyes wide with wonder, sat cross-legged on the earth, their faces illuminated by the flickering flames. The elders, their faces etched with years of wisdom, sat in a circle, the weight of their years reflected in their slow, deliberate movements. The fire crackled, sending sparks into the darkening sky, as if the flames themselves were reaching for the ancestors. Tonight, the elders would tell a story woven with the threads of caution, wisdom, and the spirits of the forest. As the flames danced higher, a hush fell over the gathering. The village, young and old, waited in reverence. Old Mzi Ndiko, The eldest of the elders cleared his throat, his deep voice steady and powerful. "Listen, children, listen well. The forest whispers, and it does not forget." The children leaned in, their ears tuned to every word, while the adults nodded in solemn understanding. Mumzi Ndiko began. "Long ago," he began, his voice low and filled with the weight of ages, "there was a man named Kalumba. His heart was heavy with ambition, a fire that could not be quenched. He was not content with the life the ancestors had given him. No, Kalumba wanted more. He sought power, more power than any man should have." The fire crackled loudly as if agreeing with the elder's words. One day, driven by his hunger, he ventured into the forbidden forest. The forest, you see, was not a place for the greedy. It was a sacred place, where the spirits of the land lived. Kalumba, blind with ambition, did not listen to the warnings of his people. The children gasped softly, their faces full of wonder. In the heart of the forest, Mumzi Ndiko continued, his voice growing deeper, Kalumba found a calabash, an object of great beauty and greater power. The spirits had placed it there, not as a gift, but as a test. The calabash was a vessel of immense power, yes, but also peril. It had the ability to grant desires, to shape the world around it, but it also had the power to destroy. Kalumba, the elder said with a slow shake of his head, took the calabash, thinking that it would make him greater than any man. But the spirits are always watching, and they will not suffer those who disturb the balance of the world. The Titindi fire's light flickered, casting shadows that seemed to stretch and dance in time with Mumzi Ndiko's words. Kalumba's greed led him to betray his people, his family, and his very soul. He used the calabash's power, and in doing so, he destroyed everything that he had once held dear. His ambition had become his downfall. Mumzi Ndiko paused for a moment, letting the words sink in. The silence was thick, almost palpable as the villagers absorbed the weight of the tale. "But," he said finally, his voice filled with a softness that made the listeners lean forward, "Kalumba, after much suffering, found redemption. He returned to the forest, seeking forgiveness from the spirits. The calabash, having tested him, allowed him to return it, and in doing so, the balance was restored. The spirits forgave him, and the drought that had plagued the village was lifted. Kalumba learned that true power lies not in control, but in respect. Respect for nature, for tradition, and for the balance that the ancestors have set. The flames of the fire seemed to settle for a moment, the crackling less fierce, as if the story had left a mark on the very air round them. Mumzi Ndiko's voice softened as he looked around the circle. "This story, children, is not just for Kalumba. It is for all of us. Remember his fall, and remember his rise. The calabash was a test, but the true lesson is humility. Let it be a warning. Let it be a guide. The forest watches, and it does not forget." The elders nodded in agreement, their faces serious. The children sat in awe, the lessons of the story etched deeply into their hearts. As the fire burned lower, the elders turned to the children, their faces gentle but firm. "You are the ones who will carry this story forward," Mumzi Ndiko said, his eyes locking with each child. "You will tell it to your children and your children's children. Kalumba's journey is not just a tale of failure. It is a story of redemption, of learning the value of humility and respect. You must carry these lessons with you, for they are the heart of our people." The children nodded, their young faces reflecting a quiet understanding. They would carry this story, as the ancestors had carried their wisdom through generations. The fire's last embers glowed softly in the night air, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch into eternity. As the elders rose to leave, the village was filled with a deep sense of connection. Kalumba's story had become part of their lives now, a story not just told, but lived. It would be passed on for generations, a constant reminder of the balance that must be maintained, the humility that must be honored, and the power that can only be wielded with respect. And so, as the village settled for the night, the flames of the fire continued to flicker in the hearts of the people, a living legacy of the lessons shared. Kalumba's tale was now woven into the fabric of their lives, a timeless reminder that the forest watches and it does not forget.